How has your day been so far? Hello, we're AETA Stories, and today we're sharing a brand new original story with you. Megan Carter gave birth in a private maternity hospital in Cleveland, Ohio, early in the morning, after a long night that had blurred into quiet exhaustion. The delivery itself was uncomplicated, almost routine. The monitors beeped steadily. The obstetrician spoke in calm, practiced tones. Megan lay back against the pillows, breathing through the final moments, waiting for the sound she had imagined for months, the first strong cry of her child. The cry did come, thin but unmistakably alive. And yet, almost immediately, something shifted in the room. The nurse who received the baby paused. Her smile flickered just briefly before settling into a neutral expression. Another nurse stepped closer. No one brought the baby to Megan's chest right away. Instead, the newborn was carried toward the examination table beneath the warming lights. Megan lifted her head, confused, trying to see past the moving bodies. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice still unsteady from effort. "Nothing serious," the nurse replied quickly, too quickly. "We're just going to have the neonatologist take a look. Standard procedure." Megan watched as the baby was weighed and measured. She strained to catch a glimpse of her daughter's face, but the angle was wrong, the movement constant. The room felt suddenly too quiet. A neonatologist entered, a slender man with tired eyes, and began a careful examination. He listened to the baby's heart, checked her reflexes, then leaned closer, studying her features. After a moment, he turned to Megan and spoke gently. "Do you know of any congenital conditions in your family? On either side? Facial differences, connective tissue issues, anything like that?" Megan frowned, trying to think through the fog. "No," she said slowly. "Not that I know of. Everyone was born healthy." The doctor nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "All right, we'll talk more in a moment." At last, the nurse brought the baby closer. Megan reached out instinctively, her hands trembling. The blanket was adjusted, and for the first time, Megan saw her daughter's face clearly. Her breath caught. One side of the baby's face sat slightly lower than the other. One cheek appeared fuller, the mouth drawn faintly to the right. The right eye rested just a little lower than the left. It was subtle, but unmistakable. This was not the face Megan had imagined during sleepless nights and quiet hopes. The world seemed to narrow to that single moment, the room tilting as her expectations shattered. She shook her head as if refusing to believe what she was seeing. "No," she whispered. That can't be." Tears welled before she could stop them. Her chest tightened, panic rising fast and sharp. The neonatologist stepped closer. "Megan," he said calmly, "I know this is overwhelming. What your daughter has appears to be congenital facial asymmetry. It can be associated with muscle or skeletal development. In many cases, it's treatable." "Treatable?" Megan echoed, clinging to the word. "Yes," he continued. "It won't be easy. It may involve multiple corrective surgeries over several years. There will be evaluations, careful monitoring, but this is not hopeless." That was enough. Megan pressed her lips together, forcing herself to breathe. Hope, fragile but real, took root. When a nurse cautiously mentioned social services and alternative care options, Megan's response was immediate and firm. "No," she said. "She's my daughter. I'm not discussing anything else." She held her baby close, as if daring the world to argue. Later, when the room was quiet again, Megan reached for her phone and typed a message to her husband. "She's here. Our daughter is born. The doctors say she'll need treatment, but it's manageable. We'll get through this together." Michael Carter's response arrived hours later, stripped of warmth. He did not ask how Megan was feeling. He did not ask whether the baby was crying or sleeping or safe. Instead, he focused on the one word that had unsettled him. "Asymmetry?" he wrote. "What does that even mean? Are you sure they didn't make a mistake?" Megan reread the message several times before answering. She explained again, carefully, repeating what the doctors had told her. She emphasized the part about treatment, about surgery, about hope. Michael replied with short, clipped messages. He questioned the hospital. He questioned the diagnosis. At one point, he even asked whether the baby could have been switched. The suggestion left Megan staring at the screen, stunned. She did not respond to that message at all. In the days that followed, Michael came to the hospital only once. He arrived late in the evening, stayed no more than 15 minutes, and never asked to see the baby. He placed a bag of clothes on the chair, avoided Megan's eyes, and spoke mostly about work. When Megan gently asked if he wanted to meet his daughter, he said he was tired and that there would be time later. After that, he stopped coming altogether. Megan tried to convince herself that he was overwhelmed, that he needed time. She watched other fathers walk the halls with flowers and balloons, their voices loud with excitement. At night, alone in the dim hospital room, unease crept in. Something felt wrong in a way she could not name, but she pushed the feeling aside and held on to the idea that Michael would come around. Discharge day arrived 6 days later. Megan stood near the entrance, holding her daughter close, her body tense with anticipation. When Michael's car pulled up, she barely recognized him. The vehicle was decorated with white and pink balloons. He stepped out, holding a large bouquet of red roses and a smaller box of chocolates. A video camera hung from his hand. He smiled broadly as hospital staff gathered nearby. He kissed Megan's cheek, handed her the flowers, and turned on the camera. "Well," he said lightly, "where's our girl?" A nurse appeared with the baby wrapped in a pink blanket and handed her to Megan. Michael leaned in, playing his role flawlessly, thanking the staff, making polite jokes. He even took the baby briefly, carrying her carefully toward the car. Once inside, the doors closed. The noise of the hospital faded. Michael turned to Megan. "Let me see her properly," he said, and folded back the edge of the blanket. The change was immediate. His face tightened. The smile vanished. He covered the baby again, as if recoiling from what he had seen. Then he looked at Megan, his eyes hard. "Get out of the car," he said. Megan stared at him, not understanding. He shoved the baby back into her arms. "I said get out. I'm not taking this home." His voice was flat, absolute. "I waited 9 months for a child. I did not ask for a child like this." He tossed her bag at her feet, slammed the door, and drove away, leaving Megan standing at the hospital entrance, holding her newborn as the car disappeared from view. Megan stood where Michael had left her, her body rigid, her arms locked around the small, warm weight of her daughter. For a few seconds, she could not move. The automatic doors behind her slid open and closed as people passed through, their conversations carrying on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. From the hospital windows above, unfamiliar faces looked down, some curious, some sympathetic, some already turning away. The noise of the city pressed in. Megan felt exposed, as though every pair of eyes could see straight through her. She lowered her head, pressed her cheek to the soft blanket, and forced herself to breathe. After a moment, she turned and walked back inside. The same nurses who had watched her leave now saw her return, alone. No one asked questions. They gave her a quiet space for a few minutes, enough time for Megan to gather her thoughts and check her phone. There were no missed calls, no new messages. Michael had vanished as completely as if he had never been there at all. Megan knew she could not stay. She stepped back outside, adjusted the blanket around her daughter, and started toward the bus stop. A taxi passed by, but she did not raise her hand. She checked her wallet instead, already knowing what she would find. There was not enough. When the bus arrived, the driver hesitated when he saw her. Megan spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have enough cash," she said. "I just need to get across town." The driver studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Take a seat." She climbed aboard and sat near the window, turning her body inward, shielding her daughter from view. The bus rumbled forward. Passengers glanced over, then looked again. A newborn was impossible to miss. Whispers followed. A woman shook her head. An older man frowned in disapproval. "Where's the father?" someone muttered, not quite softly enough. Megan did not respond. She stared out the window, counting streetlights, rocking slightly when the baby stirred. When her daughter whimpered, Megan pressed her closer and hummed under her breath until the small sound faded. By the time she reached her mother's apartment, her arms ached and her legs felt unsteady. She climbed the stairs slowly and knocked. Margaret Wilson opened the door and froze. For a second, she simply stared. Then she rushed forward, pulling Megan and the baby into her arms without asking a single question. The door closed behind them. Inside, Megan's strength gave out. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking, and everything she'd been holding back finally broke loose. She told her mother about the hospital, about the diagnosis, about Michael's messages, his distance, his performance in front of the staff, and finally, about the car. Margaret listened in silence, her face pale, her mouth pressed into a thin line. When Megan finished, the room felt unbearably quiet. "So he left you," Margaret said slowly. "He left his own child." Megan nodded. Saying it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. Margaret straightened her shoulders. "Then we'll manage without him," she said, though her voice trembled. "It won't be easy, but you're not alone." Megan looked around the small apartment, the worn furniture, the familiar walls, and understood with painful clarity that the life she had planned was gone. What lay ahead was unknown, and there was no going back. 2 days later, Megan returned to the apartment she had once called home. She left Paula with her mother and took the bus alone, carrying a single empty bag. She told herself she would be quick, just the essentials, the stroller, the crib sheets, the small things she had carefully prepared during the last months of pregnancy, believing she would be bringing her child back there. The building looked the same, clean lobby, familiar hum of the elevator. For a moment, she almost expected Michael to open the door and tell her everything had been a mistake. He did not. Megan stepped out onto their floor and walked down the hallway. She rang the doorbell once, then again. Silence answered her. It was the middle of the day. Michael worked from home often. He should have been there. Her hand trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out her keys. They did not fit. She tried again, pressing harder, then switching keys, her breath shallow and quick. Nothing turned. Only then did she notice the shine of new metal around the locks. Both had been replaced. Megan closed her eyes. The finality of it settled heavily in her chest. This was not anger. This was not confusion. This was a decision. She called Michael. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. No answer. She stood there for another minute, phone pressed to her ear, listening to the recorded greeting she suddenly hated. There was nothing left to retrieve. Megan turned away and took the stairs down, her steps slow and deliberate. Outside, she paused near the entrance, steadying herself. That was when she saw the notice board mounted by the door, flyers layered and curling at the edges. One caught her eye. Dishwashers needed. Hotel restaurant. Immediate start. She stared at the paper longer than she meant to. The words were simple, clear. There was an address and a phone number. On impulse, she tore the strip from the bottom and folded it into her pocket. The decision felt less like a choice and more like something inevitable. At home, Megan told her mother that evening. Margaret sat very still as she listened. "Work?" she repeated. "So soon?" "I don't see another option," Megan said. Her voice was calm, but only because she forced it to be. "Paula will need surgeries, not one, several, and waiting will only make things harder." Margaret rubbed her knees, already swollen by evening. "I don't know if I can keep up with her all day," she admitted quietly. "My legs. Some days they barely hold me." "I know," Megan said, softening. "I wouldn't ask if it weren't necessary." They talked it through slowly, carefully. A neighbor upstairs agreed to help for a few hours when needed. It wasn't a solution so much as a patch, fragile and temporary, but it was enough to move forward. That night, Megan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She did not imagine an easier future. She imagined work, long hours, tired hands, the weight of responsibility pressing down every day, and she accepted it. The roadside hotel restaurant sat just off the highway, its windows catching the glare of passing headlights long after sunset. Megan learned its rhythms quickly: breakfast rush, lunch lull, dinner crowds fueled by fatigue and travel. She stood at the sink hour after hour, sleeves rolled up, hands raw from hot water and detergent, stacking plates as fast as they came in. When the manager offered extra shifts, Megan took them without hesitation. Nights, weekends, holidays. If someone called in sick, she filled the gap. When the floors needed mopping after closing, she stayed. When restrooms needed scrubbing, she volunteered. Every additional hour meant a few more dollars. Every dollar had a purpose. Almost all of her earnings went to Paula. Pediatric appointments came first, then specialists, facial surgeons, developmental evaluations. Megan learned to navigate hospital corridors as confidently as she once navigated grocery aisles. She learned the language of medical charts and referral forms, insurance denials and partial approvals. When coverage fell short, she paid out of pocket and did not complain. Massage therapy became a weekly routine, recommended to support muscle balance and circulation. Megan carried Paula up narrow clinic stairs, sat beside her during sessions, and watched closely for signs of pain or fatigue. At home, she followed every instruction precisely, repeating exercises late into the evening, even when her arms trembled with exhaustion. Doctors were clear about one thing above all else: Paula's heart had to be strong. Before any major surgery, her cardiovascular health would need to be carefully evaluated. A weak heart would disqualify her entirely. The risk would be too high. Megan absorbed that information and reorganized her life around it. She adjusted Paula's diet, she monitored sleep, she limited infections, avoiding crowded places during flu season. In summer, she took Paula to quiet parks and wooded trails so she could breathe clean air. Every decision filtered through the same question: will this make her stronger or weaker? Megan herself grew thinner. Tired lines settled permanently beneath her eyes. She learned to function on little sleep, to measure time in appointments rather than days. Her mother helped when she could, watching Paula for short stretches, but age and illness limited her. Most of the responsibility rested squarely on Megan's shoulders. When Paula turned 5, the doctors agreed it was time. The first corrective surgery focused on the lower jaw. Megan signed the consent forms with steady hands, though her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She sat in the waiting room for hours, staring at the same spot on the wall, listening to the murmur of hospital life passing around her. When the surgeon finally emerged and told her the procedure had gone well, Megan felt her knees nearly give out. Recovery was slow but promising. Swelling faded, healing progressed. And then one morning, as Megan helped Paula brush her teeth, her daughter looked up at her and smiled, wide and unguarded, without hesitation. It was the first time Megan had seen that smile. She turned away quickly, pressing her fingers to her mouth, afraid that if she spoke, she would cry. For the first time in years, hope felt more solid than fear. Not victory, not relief, but something gentler, something earned. That hope did not last long. At the follow-up appointment, the doctors spoke carefully, choosing their words. More procedures would be needed. The eyes, fine muscle adjustments, timing would matter, and the cost, spoken quietly, almost apologetically, was far beyond what Megan had saved. That night, her mother suggested, again, that Megan reach out to Michael. He should help, Margaret said. No matter what he thinks, she's still his child. Megan shook her head. No, she said simply. I won't ask him. She did not explain further. She did not need to. Some doors, once closed, were not meant to be opened again. The man appeared one quiet morning, just after the breakfast rush had faded. Megan noticed him immediately, though she could not have said why. He stood near the entrance of the restaurant, scanning the room as if committing it to memory, his posture composed, his movements unhurried. He did not look lost, only thoughtful. She carried a stack of plates past him and felt a sudden, inexplicable tightening in her chest. When he lifted his eyes, the feeling sharpened. There was something about his face that unsettled her, not in a way that suggested danger, but recognition. The longer she looked, the clearer it became. His features were strong, masculine, softened by a quiet reserve. And then she saw it, the slight imbalance in his eyes. One rested just a fraction lower than the other, subtle enough that many would miss it entirely. Megan's hands trembled. She had seen that look every day for years. Over the next several days, the man returned regularly, always alone, always polite. He ordered coffee, sometimes breakfast, and thanked her each time she brought it. Their exchanges were brief, courteous, nothing more than required. And yet each time she passed his table, Megan felt the same pull, the same uneasy sense that she was looking at a future or a past she did not understand. One afternoon, as she wiped down the counter near his seat, he spoke first. "You work very hard," he said, his accent light but unmistakably foreign. "Every time I come here, you're still on your feet." Megan offered a small smile. "Someone has to be." He nodded, then hesitated. "I hope I'm not being intrusive," he said, "but may I ask your name?" "Megan," she replied. "Megan Carter." He introduced himself as Leonard, Dr. Leonard Poplavsky. He explained that he was staying at the hotel for several weeks on business. They spoke a little more that day than they had before, about the city, about the weather, about nothing important at all. The conversation should have ended there. Instead, it lingered. Over time, Leonard began to share small pieces of himself. He told her he had been born nearby, though he had not lived in the area for decades, that he spent most of his time traveling, that hospitals felt more familiar to him than homes. One evening, as the restaurant emptied and the staff moved more slowly, Megan found the courage to ask the question that had been building inside her. "If you don't mind," she said carefully, "were you born with it?" Leonard did not pretend to misunderstand. He touched the side of his face lightly. "Yes," he said, "facial asymmetry." He spoke without bitterness, as if stating a fact long accepted. He told her that his biological mother had panicked when she saw him and signed the papers immediately. He grew up in care until he was adopted by a childless couple who gave him their name, their patience, and every opportunity they could afford. "They fixed what they could," he said quietly. "The rest, I learned to live with." He went on to describe his education, his training, his work as a cardiothoracic surgeon. He spoke of operating rooms and long nights, of lives saved and limits accepted. Megan listened in silence, her heart pounding. The parallels were impossible to ignore. As Leonard finished, she realized her hands were clenched tightly at her sides. For the first time in years, the story she carried alone no longer felt like hers, alone to bear. Leonard waited for Megan outside the restaurant one evening after her shift ended. He stood a few steps back from the door, hands clasped loosely in front of him, as if careful not to crowd her. When she noticed him, she stopped short. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," he said quickly. "If it is, please tell me. I only wanted to ask if you'd like to talk somewhere quieter, outside of work." Megan hesitated. Her first instinct was caution. She had learned, over the years, to guard herself carefully. But this was Leonard, the man whose face echoed her daughter's in ways she could not ignore. Slowly she nodded. They walked for a while along a side street, the noise of traffic fading behind them. Leonard spoke first, filling the silence gently, never pressing. Eventually, Megan found herself telling him what she had not planned to say aloud. "I have a daughter," she began. "She's 5. Leonard's expression softened immediately. "I see," he said. "And she's like me?" "Yes," Megan replied. The word felt heavier spoken aloud. She told him about the diagnosis, the surgeries, the years of appointments and precautions. She told him about the first operation, about the smile that had come afterward, and she told him about what still remained. Leonard listened without interruption. There was no shock in his face, no discomfort, only understanding. When Megan finished, he said quietly, "You've done everything right." A few days later, she brought him home. Paula answered the door herself, already too curious for her age. She looked up at Leonard, studying him with open intensity, the way children did when they felt something they could not yet explain. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Paula stepped forward and held out her hand. "Hi," she said confidently. "I'm Paula." Leonard took her hand, smiling. "I know." She tilted her head, examining his face more closely. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but recognition. "You look like me," she said. Megan's breath caught. Paula did not wait for permission or explanation. She turned to Megan, then back to Leonard, and announced with complete certainty, "You're my dad." The room went very still. Leonard knelt slowly in front of her, his hands trembling. His eyes filled before he could stop it. He did not correct her. He did not laugh it off. He simply rested his hand over hers and nodded. Megan watched, stunned, as something unspoken settled into place. Later, when Paula had gone to play, Megan told Leonard about the final surgery, about the timing, about the cost. She spoke carefully, ashamed of how much the numbers frightened her. Leonard was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "There is a way." He explained that he had professional ties abroad in Serbia, that the medical care there was excellent, that he could arrange everything, but only under one condition. "I want you and Paula to come with me," he said, "as my family, as my wife and daughter." Megan stared at him, overwhelmed. "I can't accept charity," she said. "This isn't charity," Leonard replied firmly. "It's a choice. I'm choosing you." Megan understood the weight of what he was offering, a new country, a new life, a decision that would change everything. After a long silence, she nodded, and the path ahead, uncertain as it was, finally felt shared. After the divorce, Michael Carter reorganized his life around absence. He avoided commitments with the same precision he once applied to business deals. Women came and went, briefly and conveniently, never staying long enough to ask questions he did not want to answer. He told himself that family life was overrated, that freedom suited him better. Children in particular became something he spoke about with visible discomfort, as if they represented a risk he refused to take again. When his mother, Anna Carter, pressed him about settling down, he cut the conversations short. "I'm done with that," he said. "I don't need complications." Anna worried quietly. She had watched her son change after the divorce, harden, retreat, narrow his world to what served him alone. Still, she told herself there must be more to the story. Michael had always been decisive. Surely there was an explanation she did not know. One afternoon, while sorting through old drawers in his study, Anna found a small memory card tucked inside a camera case. She turned it over in her fingers, puzzled. Michael rarely kept sentimental things. Curious, she slipped it into her laptop. The footage loaded slowly, the screen filled with the hospital entrance, decorations, flowers. Then Michael appeared holding a camera, smiling broadly. Anna leaned closer. She watched him accept the baby from the nurse, carry her toward the car. The angle shifted as the blanket was pulled back. What followed needed no sound. She saw the baby's face. She saw Megan's expression, confused, frightened, hopeful, all at once. And then she saw her son's reaction, the sudden stiffness, the way he thrust the child back into Megan's arms, the abrupt, cruel gestures that followed. Anna's hand flew to her mouth. Her chest tightened violently. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way beneath her. The room spun, the images still playing on the screen as she collapsed to the floor. Michael arrived home to sirens. At the hospital, when doctors explained that his mother had suffered a massive stroke, Michael's first response was not grief, but irritation. "This couldn't have waited," he snapped into his phone, already calling his attorney. "We were in the middle of finalizing documents." Business matters stalled immediately. With Anna incapacitated, signatures were delayed. Decisions hung unresolved. Investors grew restless. Payroll was missed once, then again. Employees began to leave, first cautiously, then in waves. Suppliers tightened terms. Credit lines shrank. Michael sold assets to stay afloat, a second car, then the first. Property he had once considered untouchable. None of it was enough. Debts multiplied faster than he could outrun them. The stress took its toll. Michael slept poorly, waking short of breath. He developed a persistent cough he ignored. His weight dropped. His face grew sallow, drawn tight by constant strain. He told himself it was temporary, that he would recover, rebuild, regain control. But control had already slipped away. By the time his mother passed, quietly and without regaining consciousness, Michael's empire had eroded to little more than paperwork and debt. He stood alone in the aftermath, a man who had chosen himself at every turn, and found there was no one left to stand with him. The heart attack came without warning. Michael collapsed on a city sidewalk in the late afternoon, the pressure in his chest so sudden and crushing that he barely had time to register fear before his legs gave out. Strangers gathered. Someone called for help. The siren arrived quickly, slicing through the noise of traffic, and Michael was rushed to the nearest hospital. In the emergency department, everything moved fast. Tests, oxygen, monitors. A diagnosis delivered with clinical efficiency, significant coronary blockage, immediate intervention required. Michael listened in fragments, his thoughts drifting in and out as the pain dulled into a heavy ache. He was prepped for surgery the same evening. Lying in the hospital bed, stripped of his expensive clothes and the last traces of control they represented, Michael felt smaller than he had in years. A nurse adjusted the IV line. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic. Somewhere down the corridor, machines beeped steadily, indifferent to his fear. The door opened and a woman in a white coat stepped inside. "Good evening," she said calmly. "I'm Dr. Paula Poplavsky. I'll be performing your cardiac procedure." Michael turned his head toward her, expecting nothing more than a professional face he would forget as soon as the anesthesia took hold. Instead, his breath caught. She was young, composed, her movements confident. And as she stepped closer, he saw it. The eyes. Almost perfectly aligned, almost symmetrical, but not quite. One rested just a fraction lower than the other. Subtle, barely noticeable, unmistakable. Michael's heart began to race again, alarms sounding softly as the monitor responded. Paula glanced at the screen and then at him. "Try to stay calm," she said evenly. "That will only make things harder." He wanted to speak, to ask, to deny what he already knew. But no words came. He could only stare, trapped by the recognition he had spent decades avoiding. The surgery itself passed in a blur he would later struggle to recall. Bright lights, masked faces, then darkness. When Michael woke, the pain was different. Muted, controlled. The procedure had gone well. He lay in recovery, weak and disoriented, until the familiar figure appeared again at his bedside. "The operation was successful," Paula said. "Your condition is stable." "Thank you," Michael whispered. His voice cracked. Paula nodded, professional but not cold. As she checked his chart, he found the courage to speak. "You're very capable," he said, grasping for something safe. She smiled slightly. "I had an excellent teacher." He looked at her, searching her face for permission he did not deserve. "Your father?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Paula replied. "Leonard Poplavsky. He taught me everything that matters, not just medicine." Michael closed his eyes. The truth settled heavily over him, complete and undeniable. No accusations were spoken. None were needed. Every choice he had made echoed back in that moment. "I could have been proud of you," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Paula regarded him steadily. "I am proud," she answered, "of the people who chose me." There was no anger in her voice, no triumph, only certainty. When she turned to leave, Michael watched her go, understanding at last that some losses could not be repaired, and that regret, when it arrived, came too late to ask for anything more. Months passed before Michael returned to the cemetery. The day was gray but dry, the air cool and still. He stood in front of his mother's grave, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the name carved into stone, as if it might explain something he had missed while she was still alive. The flowers he had brought lay untouched at his feet. He had been standing there for a long time when he sensed movement behind him. Footsteps approached quietly. Michael turned and saw Paula. She stood a few paces away, dressed simply, her posture straight and composed. She did not look surprised to see him, only wary, as if she had anticipated this moment and prepared herself for it long ago. "I come here before holidays," she said calmly, answering the question he had not yet asked. Out of respect. Michael swallowed. His throat felt tight. "I didn't know you would be here." Paula nodded slightly. "I didn't know you would, either." Silence settled between them. The cemetery was nearly empty, the quiet broken only by distant traffic and the rustle of leaves. Michael glanced back at the gravestone, then returned his gaze to her. "There's something I need to say," he began. His voice shook despite his effort to control it. "I am your biological father." Paula did not react immediately. She neither stepped back nor moved closer. She simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I know," she said at last. The admission drained what little strength Michael had left. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "I was afraid," he continued. "I made choices I can't undo. I see that now." Paula listened without interrupting, her face calm, distant. When he finished, she spoke with quiet certainty. "A parent isn't defined by biology," she said. "A real parent is the one who stays, the one who protects, sacrifices, and chooses the child every day." Michael closed his eyes. The words landed exactly where they were meant to. Paula glanced past him, toward the path leading out of the cemetery. A man stood there, waiting patiently. Leonard was older now, his hair touched with gray, but his presence was steady, reassuring. He did not approach, he did not interfere. He simply waited. "That's my father," Paula said softly. "The man who raised me, who paid for my surgeries, who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Michael nodded. There was nothing left to argue. Paula gave a small, polite nod, the kind reserved for acquaintances rather than family. Then she turned and walked away, her steps unhurried, certain. Leonard met her halfway, resting a hand lightly at her back as they left together. Michael remained where he was. Elsewhere, life had moved forward. Megan and Leonard lived quietly now, far from the chaos that had once defined their days. Their home was modest, filled with ordinary routines and unremarkable joys. Megan worked less, rested more. The constant tension she had carried for years had softened into something gentler. Paula prepared for her wedding, balancing plans with the demands of her medical career. Her future was demanding, meaningful, and fully her own. The faint asymmetry in her face remained, barely noticeable, a reminder not of what she had lacked, but of what she had survived. For those listening, this story leaves a simple truth behind. Parenthood is proven by action, not blood. Cruelty leaves echoes that return quietly but firmly. And family is sometimes the one we choose, and the one that chooses us back. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. What defines a parent in your life? What does responsibility truly mean? And who, when it mattered most, chose to stay? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments.